Hello, and welcome to another episode of Sincerely Agile with Mary. Now, if you're joining us for the first time or you're watching the replay, this is a platform where we learn, unlearn, and relearn, where we endeavor to make change agents of ourselves. And of course, it's a platform where we want to be awesome and wholesome together. My name is Mary Lanignon. I am an enterprise agile coach, and as always, I am your host. Now, today we are looking at, a very significant topic. We're looking at collaboration. To bring out the best in us, we need to collaborate effectively. And to have this conversation with me, I have Marsha Acker, and I'm just going to welcome her to the show. Hello, Marsha.
Hi, Mary.
How are you?
I'm well. It's lovely to be here. So thanks for having me.
It is amazing to have you on Sincerely Agile with Mary. Thank you for making time on a Sunday afternoon for
Yeah.
you, right? Sunday
Yeah.
afternoon for you, Sunday evening for me. It's great to have you on the show. How have you
Mhm.
been?
I've been good. It's been a good year. But I'm also ready for the holidays. For some time off.
You're having a winter holiday?
Yes, I am going to take an extended holiday this year, so I'm looking forward to
And I'm sure it's a well-deserved holiday as well.
it.
I'm
Well,
looking
whether it's
forward to
deserved or
something.
not, it's going to happen.
It's gonna happen. Either way, it's gonna happen.
That's right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, how have you been the last, what, 18, 19, 20 months with the
Mm.
COVID situation? How has that been like for you work-wise?
Yeah. Yeah. It's gosh, COVID was a game changer. It certainly was for us, for me personally, and for the company, for Team Catapult. But I think in many ways, there's certainly aspects about being in a global pandemic that I don't wish or want on anybody for all of the reasons around health and safety.
Mhm.
But from a work perspective, I feel like very early on in the pandemic, it caused us to kind of walk our own talk around agility and how do you go from being in the room with people, which I love, whether we're teaching a workshop around facilitation or coaching, or whether we're working with real teams. I love being in the room, but we went overnight, literally taking a weekend to flip around a 5-day residential program to make it online,
Yeah.
instead of being in the room. And I can look back over the period of time and just
Mhm.
be really grateful for, I think in any time when there's a change, kind of even a forced change like the pandemic brought, it strips away things that you relied on, or
Absolutely.
it just was a habit, or it became a habit or way of thinking. And there are certain things that we had been wanting to change about the way we delivered programs anyways. And so, now it's very international, and I love the diversity that comes into our programs. So there's lots of things I'm grateful for.
And that is it. A lot of diversity comes into the program because now you're online.
Yep.
Luckily for me, I took my training online
Mm.
about 4 years before the pandemic. So, I mean, training online wise, I was ready.
Yeah.
And when that happened, I was like, I was ready.
Yeah.
But what was that like for you when you had to
Mm.
transition very quickly to training online? And what has the feedback been like from your students or participants, if you
Yeah.
like?
I, you know, for me personally, well, a little bit like you, I guess it had been about 5 or 6 years prior to the pandemic. I really had a bias against doing facilitated work online, and I decided to go to work on my own bias. So I had taken some action around, challenging some of my thinking. Long story short, that actually resulted in, well, before the pandemic, we had created a class around virtual facilitation and how to create space even online, even in a room. And I challenged my own thinking around that, and I think we were able to take some of those lessons learned from that time and then bring it forward into the workshops. But for me personally, I also went from being a top tier status with United and Marriott hotels, uh,
Yeah.
and just spent a lot of time on the road. And I there was some kind of collective. I remember referring to it in the early parts of the pandemic. It was like being sent to the corner for a timeout, but I think it had me really challenge so many of the things that I don't know, they just had become habits, and I had assumed that that was like I needed to travel in order to do the things
Yeah.
I love to do, and so
But
I
more importantly, we had to then really walk the talk as agilists,
yeah.
isn't it? We really had to. I can see a few people joining us. We've
Mm,
got Ronke here. We've got Stella.
nice. Hi.
Happy Thanksgiving in
Yeah.
advance, she says.
Thank you.
Thank you all for being here. Yes, it has been a crazy 2 years, Stella. Absolutely. We've got Michael there. We've got Victoria. We've got a Facebook user. You have to give StreamYard some permission so we can see your name. Right. And we've
Mm,
got someone else here. Ola Fatuna is here. Right. Let me just put up our topic there. Today we're looking at agility, the power of collaboration. Actually, I came up with this topic after reading one of your articles. Now, if you're not following Marsha, you need to follow her on LinkedIn. Her articles are great.
mm.
And I thought, collaboration and agility. I'm inviting her to my show, and she's here. I'm so honored to have you. Now, let me introduce you properly to our audience. Marsha, I've got your bio right here in front of me. Now, Marsha Acker is an executive leadership and team coach whose passion and expertise is helping leaders and their teams identify and break through stuck patterns that get in the way of high performance. She is the author of The Art and Science of Facilitation: How to Lead Effective Collaboration with Agile Teams. Marsha founded Team Catapult, a coaching and change leadership firm, in 2005. She has over 20 years of experience designing and facilitating organizational change initiatives. She believes that facilitation and coaching skills are 21st century leadership skills required for leaders as they learn to lead across the organization and develop their teams. Marsha is a track founder for the IC Agile Team Coaching Track and Enterprise Coaching Track, and the recently launched Expert Cohort Program for the IC Agile Certified Expert in Agile Coaching. She has earned several certifications in the Agile space, too many for me to actually list here today. Marsha Acker, you are welcome to Sincerely Agile with Mary.
Thanks.
Now, our topic, agility, the power of collaboration. Tell us how would you define facilitation? How
Mm.
would you define facilitation?
I think of it as
Mm,
the it's mm, in a very simple but maybe deeper definition. Like it's the ability to create space for people to show up and be their best selves and
right.
offer their thoughts and opinions. Um, and I think it can be very simple, but I think there's a lot of things that sit underneath doing that. So
Right. So you come in as a facilitator and you create that space for
yeah.
people to achieve their goals, essentially, whatever the goals are. I like that definition. Now, this I find very interesting. The
Mm,
first value of the Agile Manifesto: individuals and interactions over processes and tools. When you look at this first value that was written 20 years ago,
yeah, it's
20
crazy, isn't
years
it?
ago,
20 years ago, yeah.
20 years ago, what comes to mind? I mean, this is,
Uh,
this is a loaded statement, right?
yeah. Well, last year I gave a talk at DC when in one of the anniversary celebrations, and I was reflecting on this because I think in many ways, certainly I come from the perspective that the way we interact with one another, the way we engage in the conversation, and the kinds of conversations we have are the foundation to anything that we want to do, whether it's agile or whether we want to transform something else or we want to change the world in some way. I think it's about how we're engaging in the conversation. And when I look over the 20 years, I can take both sides of the pendulum, right? I can argue that I think Agile has changed a lot in our organizations. I think it's surfaced conversations that some departments and some enterprises weren't even talking about 20 years ago. It has certainly normalized the concept of bringing skills like facilitation and coaching into the workplace. And thankfully, I don't often hear them referred to soft skills like I did 20 years ago. 20 years ago, it was really hard to even explain to somebody why facilitation or coaching skills would be helpful. I don't feel like we're having those same conversations anymore. So
Right.
in some respects, I think we've come a long way. And then if I were to talk about the flip side of that coin, I feel like we still have a ways to go. So
Exactly.
we get very focused on those tools. There's something, I don't know, it just draws you in. It's like a quick win, or I can order it overnight from someplace. And if I could just get this thing and order it or purchase it or have a detailed process for how to do it, it'll make it easier.
I heard you say normalized, but
Mm.
has it been normalized though? And you
Mm.
also, anyway, said we still have some way to go,
Yeah.
because you go into organizations and it is much easier, like you just said, to talk about the tools, to talk about strategy,
Yeah.
to talk about, all the much more perhaps tangible stuff, things that we can see. But when it comes to the people side of things, when
Mm.
it comes to conflict, when it comes to psychological safety, we still have some way to go.
Oh, for sure.
We still have some way to go. And I think that is one of the key areas where facilitation comes in. I like to carry our audience along. I can see some highlights here, so I'm just going to see. Perhaps they're asking some questions already, because they often have their own questions. Um, let's see. Okay, I'm just trying to see if anyone's asking question. Okay, joining from Kent. Nice to have you here. We've been on a very long time out. Absolutely. Hello, all joining
Mm.
from. Is that someone from your network? Marsha, is that someone from your network? No.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay, okay. And let's see any more questions. We definitely go and oh yeah, you need to connect with her. You definitely need to connect with her. Okay, and
Mm.
vice versa. Okay, absolutely, absolutely. Okay, going back to the first value of the manifesto, when I go into organizations, this is usually a goal for me
Mm.
to say that if by the time I leave a team, I mean, I need to achieve more than that, but if all I have achieved is that I have created a space
Mm.
in which this team can have both the right and difficult conversation, then we would have achieved a whole lot. That
Yeah.
is usually my take when I look at this. And then I emphasize on the 20 years because I feel we still have a really long way to go.
Mm.
And there's still so much to talk about, and that is why we are having this conversation here today.
Yeah.
So in terms of collaboration, in terms of facilitation, what can we learn from ants? I mean, even the Bible says, have we considered the ways of the ants? So what can we learn from ants in terms of just getting into that space, having the right conversations and collaborating?
Yeah. Well, I definitely, the caveat I'd give to this is I'm definitely not an ant researcher, but there's some very smart folks at Stanford who are doing quite a bit of work around that. So I just encourage anybody to go look it up.
Right.
But, I think what the thing that inspires me, quite frankly, about ants is that they work in connection with one another. I think some of the research that they're doing really points to how their brains and the neurons in their brains kind of communicate with one another. And I, hold that same theory and thinking about humans as well. And yet, I think there's so much intelligence that we can bring to each other. But my experience in working with teams, certainly in American business, is when we come together in the room to have a conversation about a retrospective or planning or where the company is going, or even what's the biggest challenge that a business challenge that the organization is grappling with. We do so many other things other than voice what we really think.
Hmm.
I think we spend time figuring out, well, what does this person think, and what do they want me to say, and what's acceptable here and what's not acceptable here, and what kind of behaviors will get me invited back to the second conversation, and what kind of behaviors will actually get me excused from the conversation in some way, or shut down. And so I think it's quite very natural and normal to do it, but I think that we just get in our own way, and we spend so much time. Ants have this, innate kind of collective intelligence that where one of them maybe not so smart, but collectively they move mountains. They work together. There's no real hierarchy. If somebody's out scurrying around collecting food and someone else is building a shelter, and one ant identifies a need, like it's immediately communicated, and the ant building something goes off and supports the gathering of food. So it's just this collective, together we can do something pretty phenomenal. And I think about the phrase collective intelligence quite a bit. I think our teams are collectively intelligent naturally, but then we do all of this stuff that kind of gets in our way.
They are a very cross-functional team.
Mm.
They've been agile forever.
Yes, they have. It's fascinating.
Absolutely, it is fascinating. Now, when we look at a lot of this stuff we're still suffering from within our organizations, there are, things we're still trying to unlearn from the way we have traditionally worked as organizations, structured our organizations, even when it comes to leadership. I mean, when we go back a few decades, scientific management and all of that, Taylorism, it was all about the leadership having all the answers. It was about leadership setting the direction, and everybody follows, right? We still have that lurking around. In the way, yes, we do. And in the way that we recruit, that is also, certain things perhaps needs to change, because we are recruited individually. We put a lot of premium on expertise.
Yeah.
But however, we are being recruited into organizations to work as a team. So what can organizations do much earlier on to make the shift from I to we?
Yeah, I love what you say about that. That we are very much rewarded. We're recruited. We're rewarded for having the answers, knowing things. I see that down even at the smallest of teams, as we're talking about facilitation, and certainly in the Agile context, we talk about this notion of facilitating and holding neutrality. And I watch so many Agile coaches, Scrum masters, leaders, managers struggle with, how do I set direction and do what I think is right, and where, tell the team where we're headed, and then also be neutral and ask people what they think. I think many people really struggle with that tension that exists in there. So your question about, how do we move that shift earlier? I think in many ways it's about looking at how we both individually and collectively create space for one another.
Right.
And it just comes down to some really small practices that I think in some ways require us to think differently, or hold different beliefs about hearing all voices. And what does it look like to hear all voices? And if I'm hearing all voices, then I'm on the line for also getting the project done on time or moving it forward. And how do I do both of those things? So
I was thinking, just as we were talking just now, I was thinking about the recruitment process. And one of the things that I know happens, more recently, is that when you're recruiting, you could actually get, if it's an agile team, that is, this doesn't happen in every single organization, but for the most part, if it's an agile team, you could then ask a couple of people within the team to be part of the recruitment process, right? To probably just have that, feel of how this person might fit into the team. And I think the purpose of that also is to give this person joining the team that sense of, these are the people you're going to be working with, by the way. These are already your potential team members, I think. Well, what do you think about that approach?
I love it. We've even in Team Catapult, as we've explored adding new faculty in the coming year, it's one of the things we've talked about is it's not really it's no longer up to me who might join. I think it's a collective decision. So
It is.
we'll work with one another, and there needs to be a fit for everybody coming in. So
Absolutely.
I love the idea.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Great.
makes a lot of sense.
It does. Now, you wrote a book.
Yeah.
There you go. The
Mm,
Art and Science of Facilitation. I tell you this much, it's a must have for my mentees. It's a
mm.
great book. Now, what motivated you to write a book on facilitation? Did you think everything out there was crap? Or what?
No, no. As a matter of fact, I think there's some phenomenal
Oh,
books,
yeah.
written about facilitation. But I, yeah, I think one of the things that's probably maybe a bit unique about how I think about facilitation, and it took me actually a while to realize this, that I tend to blend facilitation and coaching skills fairly intricately. So you and I were speaking just before, we got started, and you made a comment about underneath the facilitation stance, there's some coactive principles. So, that is true for me. There is very much a blending of bringing coaching skills as well as facilitation skills. I think the gap that I saw is we talk a lot about facilitation tools, and there's a lot of tools and processes. I hadn't read anything that really struck the chord for me about the place that you come from. Like, what do you believe when you step in front of a group of people that would actually help you and help support some of the different behaviors that you might bring forward? And so that's really the purpose behind the book. That and I, we'd been teaching those concepts since 2010, 2011. And I wanted to spread the word in a way in which we couldn't do just through our workshops. So
Right. So, because these are some of the ways you've been teaching your students, so to speak, and you
yeah,
felt this was so good, you needed to spread it out.
yeah.
And I totally understand what you're saying there, because when I started reading the book, I was like, wow. Now
Mm.
I'm going to read. I'm going to read just that first introduction. I just dropped my pen. Um, have we forgotten how to communicate and collaborate with others? Or did we just never learn? And then you went on to say, more often than not, we more often than not, we what we do instead is what my colleague Ben Tinker calls collaboration theater. That is powerful. So we are not exactly collaborating, but we come together as though we are collaborating. Now, why is that? Is that because of a lack of safety?
I think it's a lot of things. I think in
Mm,
many organizations, it's a lack of safety.
yeah,
And I think the lack of safety gets created.
yeah,
What I observe the most goes back to what you said a moment ago,
yeah,
Mary, where we're recruited
yeah,
and we're rewarded for having the answers and
yeah.
knowing the right solutions. And if you'll hear a phrase that just sort of makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up is, I don't want to hear, don't bring me problems, bring me solutions. So that kind of phrasing and thinking is what gets us to this place where we need people that hero it out and have the answers and set the vision and then persuade, convince, or cajole other people to carry out, your vision. And I think what we're learning and what we've known for quite some time is it doesn't work.
Yeah,
But for some reason, it
yeah,
doesn't make it any easier to do something different when we get in the room with others, unless we start to really pay attention to our own bias, how we show up and how we engage in those conversations. And so if you take someone who's been hired to be, the knower and the doer and is rewarded for it, and then you ask them to collaborate with a team, they're just instinctively going to do what they think they're being rewarded to do, which is set direction. And so then when you get in a room full of people and you're trying to convince them that this is the direction and you only have an hour for the meeting, it's really hard to hear voices because busy asserting, you're advocating for your point of view or perspective. And I think that's where that collaboration theater comes in, when we think we are collaborating, but really what we're doing and the impact that we're having on others is shutting people down,
Absolutely. An
cutting them
echo
off.
chamber. An echo
Yeah,
chamber.
yeah. And I don't really want to come to a meeting where you're just going to tell me what you want me to think. How about you just tell me what you want me to do, and then I'll go do it. And then that's where you get apathy or disengagement, or people are multitasking, because there's a sense of, I don't really know what my role is here, and I'm not sure what you want to hear from me. It feels like you've already got it figured out, but yet we're here putting things on sticky notes, and I'm just kind of confused as a participant. And then I hear facilitators, complain about people won't turn their cameras on and they won't be engaged and they don't want to contribute. And I think, that's really things that should make you get curious.
Yeah.
What might be causing that?
Absolutely.
I don't think it's just that people are disengaged. So I think it comes from a very systemic challenge of believing that we've been given some particular kind of role.
Absolutely. And this is where the self-awareness comes in, isn't it? We really need to be self-aware about how we show up. Because like you said, collaboration theater, we get together, but I'm already here. I know exactly what I want the outcome to be.
Yeah.
Whereas I should be listening to the voice of the system, as it were. But when we are in that I space, as opposed to the we space, that is what tends to happen, isn't it?
Yeah.
I've got some more comments or questions, perhaps. I'm just going to look again. Ronke says, have my copy of the book also. Absolutely. Thanks for sharing, she said.
Yeah,
Some companies recruit for fit and mindset, then train, though you must have a measure of skills to start. Absolutely. We really need that cultural fit, because you can always train people. And another one person here says, as an agile coach, I am sure you have experienced owners don't really appreciate decentralized authority. That is a mindset, shift that is needed right there. Because this is so important, and that's a very, good comment coming there. Because, we've seen organizations that have gone bust because of hierarchy, because they have not, taken the time to think about what can be decentralized and what should be centralized. When we talk about decentralizing decision, we are not saying every single decision should be decentralized, right? But we really need to think if it's worth holding on to some, decision. So you need to give power to where the work is being done. And of course, it has a lot to do with the mindset. People may begin to feel irrelevant because they're not making decisions anymore. As coaches, we've had to coach managers into a different mindset of leadership coaching and facilitation, because of that fear of, am I still relevant here or not? So it's a whole mindset stuff going on there. And that is why, coaches are needed today. Hello, Coach Mary. How does Marsha feel about what the team may do when there is a deadlock in terms of owner syndrome? Do you want to answer that? If you don't mind.
I'm curious about the phrase owner syndrome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wish we could have a conversation about that. But
owner syndrome, where they don't want to let go,
Mm.
They have all the answers, and they just don't have that mindset of diversity of thought.
Yeah. Mary, I love what you were just saying a minute ago, where I think it's part of collaboration is being really clear about your decision-making process.
Yeah.
And what are the decisions that you're giving to the team to make? What are the decisions that the team is actually going to make a recommendation on, and someone else is going to make the decision? And how do we make decisions? So we talk a lot about the definition of consensus with teams, meaning I can live with and support something versus saying I agree or I love it. And I think asking a team or a group of people to come to a full agreement, or the ability to say, I love this decision. Like if I got to make this decision, that would be exactly what I would go for. I think that's a next to unrealistic objective with a group of people. When I'm looking for a team to make a decision, I'm looking for them to come to consensus, meaning at the end of that conversation, everybody in that room can say, you know what, I see where we started. I see where we got to. I see how the conversation unfolded. We've been in the conversation long enough to have a bit of a dialogue about it, meaning we've heard different perspectives and we had different points of view that came out in that conversation. And at the end of it, I might not love where we got to, but I see how we got there and I can live with this and fully support it going forward. And then I think if a team can't do that or they're locked in some kind of, ownership debate, I think that it's helpful to have a process already agreed upon before you started that says, if we can't come to consensus, then you're either going to make a recommendation or we're going to give the decision off to someone else. But to do that beforehand rather than
Absolutely.
greener after the fact.
Absolutely.
So I think we have to have people that make decisions sometimes if a team can't come to consensus. But gosh, giving people the ability to have that deeper conversation, like I think that's the collective intelligence. You keep speaking about the we space. I think that's where we, I was part of that. I got to hear that debate and I understand, the different sides of that particular issue now. So
Interesting. Because at the end of the day, I may not agree, but I have been a part of the process.
Yep.
My voice has been a part of the, voice of the system.
Yep.
So I do not agree, but I will not sabotage.
Yes.
I will not sabotage. And I think that is so important. And again, to come to that point, I guess you must be an organization that has done some work in terms of safety. Yeah. You must be that kind of organization where you can have that at your meeting to say, you know what, the process is important. Carrying every voice along is very, very important. Yeah. Great question there. I think that is Dr. Eileen there. So what does great facilitation look like?
I often start by saying,
I'm sure you've done this so many times.
No, I think about the answer to that as I first thinking about like you'll know what bad facilitation looks like and feels like, right? If you've ever been a part of it, it'll be any of those meetings that you leave feeling like you were not heard, or you got cut off in the process, or your voice was devalued in some way, or you didn't really get to like the decision that got made. You're like, well, that could have been an email. So I think that, great facilitation, if it's done really well, chances are you were so focused on the topic and you were so into the conversation and the process that was unfolding in the room that you might not even be completely aware of what facilitation was happening.
Wow. So great facilitation, you really can't tell what's happened, but everything has just been fantastic. Yeah. But if it's bad facilitation, yeah, you definitely know.
I think that people leave great facilitation and they will likely say things like, we did this, we created it. Yeah. And there will not be much of anything attributed to the facilitator.
Absolutely. Because as a facilitator, it's not about you.
Yeah.
It is not about you at all. It's about you creating the space for them. And talking about a facilitator, it's a role that you liken to a safari guide. And that to me just sounds like facilitation in and of itself is a profession on its own. Tell us more about that, a metaphor, safari guide.
You're reminding me that, right. So one of the casualties of the pandemic was that my family and I were supposed to go on safari to South Africa. And that's one of the bucket list things that didn't happen. But it was, as I think about safari guides, they're people that sort of help you navigate this landscape that you might be unfamiliar with. And they're pointing, you're having your own experience, which participants will have their own experience inside of your workshop. But, that's somebody that's just saying, hey, we're going to go here. And now we're going to go here. And I don't know, they just create a place in order for you to be deep in the experience of what's it like to be in nature and, through the jungle or walking through, land where humans are not the top of the food chain. So it just, it can be dangerous and
Hmm.
it can also be exciting. So I think about facilitators as being process safari guides along the way.
Great metaphor there. Great metaphor. And as leaders, I mean, we've sort of touched on this. As a leader, collaboration takes courage and humility. What's in their way?
Mm.
Why is it so difficult to do? Why is it difficult to come into a room and not be the boss? Why is it difficult to come into a room and um, just help create that space as a leader, and and not feel the need to show up as a boss?
I think that's a combination of a lot of things. I think it's doing your own work, finding your own balance of ego and humility, and learning that you can contribute, you can lead and still be a facilitator and not have all the answers. That in and of itself, to me, is also leadership. I don't think leadership is just asserting an opinion or a direction, or
Mhm.
advocating for your point of view. We talk about that as leadership range. So your ability to step forward and advocate for something, but also your ability to step back and support others or ask questions or be curious. And it's it feels like there's so much behind your question about what's in the way of doing that. But I'll give you a personal example, and then I also watch agile coaches and scrum masters struggle with this as well. So it goes to that systemic viewpoint and what's rewarded in the organization and what does your sponsor think
Yeah.
good looks like. Um, but it's many years ago. So I was probably 5 or 6 years into my facilitator skills, and I had my own struggle with how can I add value and be valuable and get paid as a consultant to facilitate, and then also not steer or guide or overly direct the outcome,
Hmm.
the content of what we're talking about. And
Yeah.
the end of the day, I had been in a session and it wasn't fantastic. It didn't go great. And I had my own stuff that I was worried about, feeling like I didn't do a great job. And the sponsor came up to me and said, I'm not sure that really went well. And I really question why we would need a facilitator or why we would pay for a facilitator. And so I went home and I came back the next day with more stuff, more tools. We were gonna fit this conversation into a new tool, and I was gonna tackle this and just really convinced that I could show value. If I were to have that, if I got a replay today with my today self versus my previous self, there's some of that I would put back on the group as saying, actually, this isn't mine to own. Like, but this is a
Exactly.
more difficult conversation that they weren't quite ready and willing to have. And that, the not having that conversation that I didn't quite see back then, um, was really the thing that was getting in their way. And it was a very political conversation. It was definitely difficult for them to surface that first, like
Mm.
name it and put it in the room, and then dive into it and have that conversation. But certainly in my today self, I'd say, yeah, sure, I own a piece of that, but
Mm.
not the whole thing. And I think that it's partly what's in the system. What do you value in facilitators or facilitator as a skill anyways? And then what's your own work to do
Mm.
to frame
Hmm.
and pull apart what's happening for the group, and how groups having breakdowns or ending up in dysfunction is not always a reflection of your facilitation. It's often, I think, a sign of something that's needed or wanted in the group.
Absolutely. And that's, I mean, facilitation is a great skill to have because you need to read the room. You
Yeah.
need to manage your own, yourself, and you need to manage the room. So there's a lot going on at once. And that
Yes.
takes me to this. There's so much going on at once.
Mm.
As a facilitator, you're holding the group's agenda, you're honoring the wisdom of the group, you're maintaining neutrality, you're upholding the agile mindset and principles, and you're standing in the storm. There's so much going on. These are some of the principles of great facilitation. You have to manage your emotions. You have to manage the,
Mhm.
the system, as it were. So tell us about these principles, because these are, I mean, the pillars of your book, to be
Yeah.
honest.
Yeah. Well, these came after years of training new facilitators and testing them out to make sure they sort of stood up, and they're very intertwined. I pull them apart in the book and talk about them separately, but you'll notice in the practices that the implementation of these, they're very intricately linked to one another. So maintaining neutrality helps me do a lot of those other things as well as standing in the storm. So the principle around standing in the storm and the story that I just shared with you, like it would have been, I could have done that differently today than I did, back then. But standing in the storm has also been the place of my greatest work to do. And certainly my biggest journey in my own facilitation is the ability to, one of the things that we talk about in that principle is when things go, to quote a group that I worked with recently, they referred to it as off the rails, and in their particular system, that creates a lot of um, stress and high stakes for them, because when things go off the rails, they're then held responsible for it.
Yeah,
But in standing in the storm, the principle underneath of that is actually groups need to go through the storm rather than avoiding it. And
absolutely.
it is only through that ability for you to be this calming presence in the center of what can feel like a pretty rough storm, and invite the group into that process, not drag them through it, not
Hmm.
push them through it, but
Yeah,
just to be a presence in that storm, to bring curiosity, to bring questions, and invite them to come through it. Because I think on the other side of that is where I actually think it's the doorway between the I and me space to the we space. But until we have storms, until the topic that we're not talking about comes forward and we're able to name it and be in a, a more dialogic conversation about it, which means people are bringing their real voice forward. We're also listening. We're suspending judgment. We're respecting different points of view.
yeah.
Until that can happen, that we space will continue to evade us.
It will. It will. Holding the group's agenda, that is so important. It is not about us at all.
Yeah.
Honoring the wisdom of the group. I mean, I was saying earlier that I sort of see some of the principles of co-active coaching here.
Mhm.
Honoring the wisdom of the group, believing that everybody is very capable. We are capable. And of course, not taking sides, and upholding the agile mindset and principles. That is so key, upholding the agile mindset and principles, because I always liken the agile values and principles to the compass in a ship. you know
Mm,
that it is so important. You need that, and you will always go back to that from time to time. That
yeah.
is so important. And standing in the storm, of course. And I like how you said it's not about avoiding the storm,
Mm-mm.
but rather going through the storm. And for us to be able to go through the storm properly, I find we always come back to safety. The
Yeah.
environment has got to be safe. The facilitator has got to help hold that safe space and ask powerful questions as well to direct them. Awesome, awesome. Marsha Acker, it has been great talking to you. We've got some more comments here, I believe. Um, We've got Stella saying, love these principles of facilitating. Absolutely. It really does start with reading the room to embed all of that. And like she said, it's all working together. You
Yeah.
have to, it's like you're jogging 5 balls at the same time. In
Yeah.
fact, you're jogging 7. You have to manage your emotions, and you have to manage the collective emotion in the room.
I often
Absolutely.
say, as soon as you onboard all of the
Yeah.
principles, you won't
Yeah.
have time to contribute to the content.
Mm. You
You'll be
wouldn't. And
you'll
because you
be
shouldn't even be in the content anyway.
You'll be too busy focusing on the multiple levels of what's happening in the dynamics.
Absolutely. You shouldn't be in the content. You're there to, for the process, so that the entire, goal of why they've come together can be achieved.
Yeah.
Now, Marsha has written an amazing book, like I said before. This is what you want on your shelf if you need a book on facilitation. It's a great book on facilitation. You want to go get yours. You want to go get yours. I got mine on Amazon, and you will find her on LinkedIn. Now, she puts great articles out there. When I say great, I mean great. So you want to, link up with Marsha on LinkedIn so that you can get to read some of her articles. And of course, she has a website, Team Catapult. She runs a lot of programs, leadership programs, facilitation programs. I mean, facilitation skills. These are some of the things that set us apart as Scrum Masters and as coaches. So if you're looking to take any facilitation course, hit her. Check out teamcatapult.com. Marsha, I can't thank you enough for the time you have spent with me today. I mean, Sundays are usually your chilling days, right? But you are taking time out of that normal routine to be on Sincerely Agile with Mary. And we absolutely, absolutely love you and appreciate you for that. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Now, next week, we're going to have Simon Powers, and we're going to be talking about agile transformation. What does good look like? And to our audience, you're always here every Sunday with us. We really thank you. We appreciate you. And we will be seeing you again next Sunday, same time, same place on Sincerely Agile with Mary. Marsha, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. And bye-bye.